With the release of Dragon Ball Fusion World, Frieza positions itself as the strongest out-of-the-box starter deck. With the release of the main set though, is he any good? Everybody's Espira, and we're jumping back into another deck profile. This time we're going to be covering one of the upgraded starter decks. It's going to be my goal to try and get you guys a build for every single one as we're in this kind of in-between week period of the starter deck release, plus booster boxes, whoever was able to get their hands on some, and the main set release at the end of next week. If the build is all you care about, here you are, but I think some of the explanations will kind of give you some context as to the tech choices I'm making in the specific ways I'm building this deck. Frieza has a lot of flexibility because of how generically good his leader is. So in that regard, I think there are many ways you can take it. I've seen some Ginyu aggro versions, I've seen some mid-range versions. So I think there's a lot of flex in terms of just what cards you use, because in general, there are a lot of solid usage cards that you can consider when building your Frieza deck. In terms of this specific version, I'm aiming a little bit more mid-rangey to deal with a little bit of everything, giving it a little bit more of a catch-all feel as opposed to something that's specifically targeting green or specifically targeting another color. I think it's smart to go in with a build that can deal with a little bit of everything while things settle down and we kind of figure out what people are playing and how they're playing. In terms of the leader, you guys have probably been playing against or with a lot of him. Nothing special on the front side, just a draw leader, but on the back side does have the end of turn ability to get to choose 2 of your battle cards and switch them to active mode, which is really nice. Not locked to Frieza's army, so it's just generically strong with any yellow cards, which gives us some flexibility to be able to mess around. The leader gives us the ability to be able to have additional combo power on our turn, gives us the ability to have additional blockers on our turn, which is always welcome. And of course, it takes away the opportunity for your opponent to be able to attack into your board, meaning that they're gonna have to commit more removal to try and deal with your stuff. So as we can tell, much stronger on the awakened side, and that's why we see such a heavy leaning into self-awakening packages. We're running 4 of the 2-drop Frieza because he's just incredibly strong, mitigates board, can force us to win against the awakening game with our opponent. Then we run Zarbon, only at 2 though, because he is a 20k blocker with an on play take a life. But if we look at knees over on Cooler's side, it's like him but better because he happens to have an additional 5k combo for some reason. Sure, there's no Frieza's army synergy there, but that's fine. The deck isn't really all that reliant on getting full usage of the tag. From our Self-Awakeners, we move over to our top end, which Yellow's top end is really strong and really annoying. To kick it off, we have the 4-drop Cooler 30k blocker, and he has a when attacking / when blocking. So either time he's doing either of those things, he'll be able to choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards and switch it to rest mode. Then, if that card is a cost 2 or less, KO it. The way this works, I believe, is even if you choose a card that's already in rest mode, if it's a 2-drop or less, it will KO it. So I do think that works that way. And in Frieza, you can get both the attacking and the blocking because, of course, you attack and then you restem at the end of the turn, thus getting his blocking ability, making him a phenomenal attacker. The 30k stat line is really nice, but the only place where it kind of falters a little bit is that if we're facing into, say, Gohan's, which I think a lot of people are expecting to play quite a bit at the release of the game, he's just 5k short from really being able to get there. And that's kind of where the 4-drop Frieza comes in, a beefy 40k for 4, which is the best stat to cost line in the entire game. With the permanent, this card can't be switched to active mode during your charge phase. Annoying, but of course we circumvent that by just being able to restand him at the end of our turn. Also, having a boss monster that has a 5k combo is nice because, as you can see with Cooler and with Golden Frieza, they actually have none. And Golden Frieza, of course, no surprise there, our double strikey boy that also serves as our top end removal, making sure cards stay in rest mode till the end of our opponent's next turn. The card's strong, you want to see it in multiple numbers. Oftentimes you will be in a position to have to take 2 life from your opponent, and so the card is very much welcome. And that's the crux of the deck for the most part. It's our Self-Awakeners, which lead us into our very strong top end. And the good part about our Self-Awakeners is the fact that they're 20k bodies, which means they're like our mid-range pieces anyways, so they double function there as well. In terms of our consistency, we want to see our Self-Awakeners. We want to be able to see our top end. So of course, we're maxing out on Sorbets and Ginyu. Ginyu having the additional usage that if you're on your awakened side, you can actually get multiple draws off of him if he manages to survive turn over turn. It's unlikely, but hey, being able to draw 2 cards off of this, you already got your value, which is very much welcome. Then you restand and potentially get a 5k combo. I'm still not in love with this card, and it combos really well with Banan starting on turn 2 onwards, where you're guaranteed to get your restand. And I think if you're going to run this engine, it might be stronger in that sense, but I'm not sold on it yet. But note that there is a consideration to run that card to make the 1-drop Ginyu a little bit better. I'm just not sure if it's absolutely necessary. The cycle is probably good enough. And then to round out the rest of our mid-range, we have Kui and Sweet, one of which is the 20k 3-drop blocker, 1 KO draw a card. I just like the additional blocks. I like the additional value of 1 KO, being able to draw something. And then alternatively, we have Sui, which is a 20k critical permanent on your opponent's turn, this card gets 10k power. This means that you can more comfortably allow Sui to be in rest mode, not restand him with your ability and keep him protected, because your opponent's gonna have to dump so many more resources into having to deal with it. And I do like a 20 crit body to be able to apply pressure in positions where you don't really want to give your opponent's cards. From there, we pivot over to our one drop, which one drop Frieza, nothing to say there. The usages for this card are incredibly wide. Early game, if your opponent plays like a one drop cantrip, like let's say you're playing in the mirror and your opponent plays a sorbet, you can play Frieza, rest mode their sorbet, attack into it. Now you've gotten a draw off of your leader, you've gotten combo off of their board, and your opponent has no other target when attacking back than into you, which means if anything, you've kind of pivoted the Awakening game over to your side. And if not, then your opponent's down on cards, so you're ahead regardless of how that goes. In the late game, a smart thing that opponents can do is play their beefy 5-drop finisher or play Broly's or do whatever. And if they don't feel like they can close out the game, not attack with it so that it's able to go in the next game because they're playing around Golden Frieza. Well, if you've got 6 energy, you can one drop Frieza and then you can Golden Frieza on top of that. So really, this Frieza creates a lot of mini games in regards to your top end, forcing your opponent to have to reconsider how they're going to go in. Did your opponent play a blocker? Well, then we'll go ahead, play a one drop and rest mode it. And it's even better when you consider that's a 10k combo. Otherwise, we'd probably be playing Crusher Ball because Crusher Ball replaces itself. But here we're just guaranteed 10k combo. So we're going to play the battle card instead. And to close out, we're looking at the 2-drop Kui, which I'm doing as a concession to what I expect to be a green heavy meta. 2-drop 10k combo, which is very welcome. Blocker, when KO'd, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards and switch it to rest mode. And this does an incredible amount of work when it comes to playing against green. It effectively means that if your opponent ever wants to play one of their boss monsters, then the opponent can't play them on curve, because then they'll have to pop Kui or attack into it or something, and then Kui will keep it in rest mode. So against Android 17 and 18, if they don't pop it, then you can just block their attack, which is nice. If they do pop it, then you rest mode their battle card. Against Broly, if they pop it, then you just rest mode it. And then it sets up for your Golden Frieza the turn after. Naturally, it's a flex spot. I think if green weren't going to be so prevalent, I wouldn't be so keen on including it. But because this can kind of force your opponent to have to play 2 or 3 turns off curve, to have to focus to ramp or to deal with them first, and then the next turn potentially go in, it forces your opponent to have to play a little bit more mid-rangey than top-endy, which is to your benefit because when it comes to playing the mid-range game, Frieza has a ton of options. Moving on to the extra cards, not much to say there. Death Ball is naturally the 15k battle trick that rests a 3 cost or less. So it prevents you from being attacked multiple times. It saves you from having to deal with a blocker depending on how you sequence. It's additional power. It works on both turns, which is very flexible, very strong. And then we tech in a couple of supernovas. Activate battle on your turn, you get 20k on one of your cards. And you get to choose one of your opponent's 4 drops or less and keep it in rest mode. Having additional stun abilities is effectively how yellow removes cards. It's not actually removal, but it's close enough. So in that regard, I think the pump is really effective, especially when we're looking at the 40k Frieza, because now we're bumping up to 60k, which means our opponent needs more than 2 super combos to not have to take the damage, or they're just going to be dumping a lot of cards, which of course we are very happy to see. In terms of talking about ratios, I think it's pretty evenly split. Our consistency pieces we see at max Foros to make sure we get there. We're running a total of 10 Self-Awakeners, which composes 20% of our deck. Of course, 4 Nias, 4 Frieza, and then 2 Zarbons, because our Zarbon doesn't have as much combo power. And then on our top end, we're looking at a 3-3 split between Cooler and the 2 Friezas. I have seen some decks run 4 of the double strike Frieza, and I get it. You're usually closing out the game with a double striker, and you do want to see him rather than not. But I do believe at 3 we see him enough where I don't feel like we're losing percentages based on losing out combo power. And of course, we're just running Chilai. It doesn't really matter which super combo. If you really want to play Nail, go ahead. No reason to, but hey, why not? I do think Frieza has an incredible amount of versatility, even in the main set meta when we take him away from just playing against other starter decks. His ability is generic, he gives you a bunch of advantage, and he can fit into a bunch of different shells. Again, I haven't even talked about the aggro shell that you can run with him, but we'll probably look into that a little bit later once we cover the other starter decks. Which of course you can pick up all of those deck profiles on this channel. Subscribe button down there, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.